So this is the Unit 1, Section 2 video. The first note is about closing signals. It says a closing signal can be used to complete a simple sentence. Sentences lacking closing signals are incomplete. Indexing at the end of a sentence or a closing signal is a closing signal and shows the completion of a thought and also shows the other person when it's their turn. Closing signals are most important when asking questions. Use a closing signal when making a statement or comment about yourself or somebody else and when asking a question. So this again is not necessary, but if you want to try to include that in your signing, go ahead. The two examples are, what is your name? You name what you. And then the answer to that would be, I'm Kelly Boyd, or my name is Kelly Boyd. So indexing to ask the person, indexing to reference myself. Complete sentences in formal ASL, never a one-word reply. In informal ASL, one-word answers are sometimes used, but one-word answers are less common in ASL than in English, so it's best to use a more complete sentence, but if it's a simple yes or no, that is probably enough. Next is some vocabulary, 2 new words, the sign for name and the sign for last. The sign for name is your 2 U or H hand shapes. My right hand, my dominant hand, taps on top of the other, name. And last is my 2 I pinky fingers, last. My right hand brushes past my left pinky, last or final, name and last. So, deaf culture note about introductions. The example sentences says, I want to introduce my friend. I want to introduce my friend. Her name is Lisa. She name Lisa. We're going to go over some of this vocab in a second. So, for introductions, for deaf people, you typically include both the first and last name, but not always. And what other information you include depends on if you are deaf or hearing. If you're hearing, when you're introduced as a hearing person, and they will say that you know or you're learning ASL, so that's important information they will add, not just your name. Hearing, learn ASL, they know how to sign. This is important information to share with the other deaf person to know, like, where you are in your language level. Can you understand me if I sign to you? How much do you understand about deaf people? That kind of thing. So this reduces cultural misunderstanding by letting them know that you are hearing, but you are not fluent in ASL, or that you are. For example, I work as an interpreter, so they'll introduce me. They'll say, hearing, she's an interpreter. So that way they know, oh, she's fluent in sign, so I can sign with her and communicate clearly. If you are deaf, then background information will be shared about yourself when you're being introduced, specifically where you are now going or where you grew up when you were going to school, what kind of a school you went to and where. It's very common in the deaf community that you'll know people in common, so they will discuss and mention how you might know the other person. She's friends with this person. His cousin is so-and-so. Went to the same school with this person. So sharing these personal details helps to make those connections. And there are many, many stories told throughout the deaf community about this one time I randomly met a person and we knew so-and-so in common. Meaning a friend of a friend in other cities, states, other countries. And the last comment is about physical contact. Deaf people are very comfortable with physical contact. You tend to shake hands when you're meeting new people, of course, and when you're greeting friends. Deaf friends often hug each other when you're saying hello or goodbye. It's very common to be more physically demonstrative than is typical in standard hearing Caucasian culture in America. So, as you go through this lesson and the rest, think about how what I've just described is similar or dissimilar to the cultures that you were raised and familiar with. Next, some vocabulary about introductions. We have the sign for deaf. You point first at your ear, and you point then at your mouth. Those are the two parts of deaf people that don't work. So deaf, it's a very commonly understood gesture too. I didn't hear you, I don't understand you. Hearing, my index finger brushes on my chin and it rolls forward in a little circle. Hearing, because we're always doing this and we're always moving our mouths, we're always talking. So hearing people are always saying things. Hearing. Hard of hearing. My H hand shape and I tap my H twice and move to the side. Hard of hearing. So those are the three appropriate ways to label or identify people's ability to hear. Deaf, of any range of being able to hear. Hearing, no hearing problems. And hard of hearing, somewhere in between. How a person chooses to identify themselves, we'll talk about that later. If people use other words as their own self-identity, that's not a big deal. But in general, these three are very commonly accepted by the deaf community as appropriate ways to label yourself. The next sign is a sign for friend. I use my X hand shapes. Friend. So my right hand holds down, and then we switch positions, and my left hand is holding down. Friend. To meet. As in, I'm meeting a friend. So my two hands come together like this. I move towards the other person to meet them. Make sure that they are not kissing each other. Make sure that your fingers are apart, because when you meet somebody, you probably don't kiss them right away. My, as opposed to me, we learned that in the last lesson. Me or I. My is my flat hand. Want. Pull it towards yourself and make your hands into a claw shape. Usually this is signed lower, but due to the filming, I'm signing it a little higher. So, want. And nice. Nice. Hand brushes down my palm. Nice. Last sign, to introduce. And again, that's usually signed quite low, so I'm not modifying it so it's visible. To introduce, similar to the sign for welcome. To people on either side, or you're bringing them together, so introduce. And a nice little sentence after you're doing all of this is nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. So the next one is fingerspelling your name. Sign last between your first name and your last name. If you're in a very formal situation, if you're in a large audience room, you'll spell your first name, you'll sign last, and you'll spell your last name. In informal, casual, everyday kind of conversations, you just pause briefly, and then spell the last name. Next is the me name. So using index, signing me or I instead of my when you're talking about your name is more appropriate in ASL. Think of it like the English phrase, I am called. So using me also shows you're more a more advanced signer. It's not wrong if I sign my name, but it's better to sign I am called or me name. Because of the way the indexing works, it sounds awkward to your English accustomed hearing, but pointing to them and saying, this is what it is, and then giving it a name is the same as saying, I'm pointing at myself, I'm indicating this, and I'm giving you the name of this. So it sounds awkward now, but as you sign more, you will see that it becomes much more comfortable. All right, I am going to sign the dialogue that is next on this just to make sure that that's clear. So she says, hi, what's up? Then she says, I want to introduce my friend. Her name is Lisa, and she is hearing. And then the other character says, giving his name sign as Sean. Says, hello, nice to meet you. My name is Sean. I'm deaf. How are you? All right, and I'm going to wrap this video up here, and I will continue this lesson in the next video.